These are tools used in all around the world in a form of agriculture, I suppose it is, dealing with the production of sugar cane, tea, coffee, rubber, and similar things. At one time, all the tools for these industries were made both in Sheffield and Birmingham, and it was absolutely enormous business. Of course, without the tools, no one could do the job. So it was extremely important. Some of the first stages, of course, in looking at these things, are to take them in some sort of order, was to till the ground to prepare planting whatever it is, the coffee or tea plants or the sugar plantations. And this particular hoe, in fact, no spades were ever used in these places, simply because the labour that they had, whether it was slave labour or local labour in any case, never wore shoes. And if you don't wear shoes, you cannot use a spade. It's as simple as that. So they used a hoe. The handles would be found locally, so it saved on freightage and that. And usually the hole in the top of the eye, as it's called, that holds the handle, is usually round or a very simple oval shape, simply because it has to have a stick into it. So this one is, in actual fact, a West Indian grubbing hoe, what's known as a square mouth, and it was for digging the ground, preparing it, ready to plant whatever was going into it. This is another one, which this was made for export, this particular one. This other one here may or may not have been export. One of the difficulties of finding things in Sheffield is that it may well have been made for export, we shall never know. However, it could have escaped, if that's the word, from wherever it was made, for some reason a slight fault in it, or dropped down at the back of somewhere and nobody found it until it was too late, and then somebody took it home on the allotment, and there you find it, and you think, what's that doing here? In actual fact, it should have been thousands of miles away. Over on the other side here, we have another form of hoe, which has what's known as a round mouth to it. It's pointed, so it digs in the soil quite a bit better. And these were made to certain patterns, and each area of the world had its own particular pattern. And this is not a hoe, but it's a Spanish slot adze, A-D-Z-E, pronounced adze in Sheffield. And this is how they were packed up, with this beautiful label made by Isaac Greaves in Sheffield. And again, this almost certainly is pre-war. I think I got that from a tool shop that was down Broad Lane, Deakin, and he cleared out many warehouses of materials that had been lying there for perhaps the previous 50 years or more, and he put them in his window at a pound each or whatever, very cheap prices, and people bought them. Where all these things are today, I don't know, but I'm sure that lurking in many sheds in Sheffield will be things like this, where some man will have gone in and said, ooh, I might make do with that. However, coming back to this one, Sheffield provided the blade and the hoop, and the handles provided by the user, and they were made for Spanish coopers, for making Spanish wine barrels, sherry and whatever. So this was the type of this is the working end of the tool, which wore out, and they kept the handle to use time and again. Other things that had to be done were to cut bushes or trees down, and to that end saws were used. If it were very big, the saws would be if the tree was very big, it was likely that the saw would be very much like what we call a two-man crosscut saw, which is the one that's illustrated at the back, which is something like 5 foot long, and it has 2 handles that fit either end into there. So each end of that has a handle, and it's pulled backwards and forwards. Sorry, that's the wrong way in. It goes, beg your pardon, it goes that way, in there like that. And then it's pulled backwards and forwards as the teeth are advancing across the tree trunk until the tree falls down. For smaller things like bushes that have to be maybe pruned, we have this pattern of saw, and in the far and Middle East they never use saws with the teeth as we have them. So these teeth cut as the saw is being pulled back. We always have saws with teeth that push, they cut on the push, but in the Far East and Middle East it's different. This is called a Grecian pattern pruning saw because of its shape, and I don't know that it was used in Greece or not, but certainly it might have been for olive bushes or whatever, but these are always on the pull. This is a similar one, but it has an iron socket, and that would take a pole. So this would be the end of a long pole, might be 5 foot long, 10 foot long, and you could cut branches off whilst you stood on the ground, branches off that were quite high in the bush. Another saw, which this is known as a Turkish pattern saw, very unusual handle, so the hand fits round it sort of like that. Our handles, of course, are quite different to this. They're enclosed and it's held in a different manner, but and again on this one the teeth are facing backwards, so it cuts on the pull. You pull it on the pull stroke, it cuts. If one has to be more brutal, or in the terms of thinner materials that you're cutting down, things of this sort were used. Now then, let me see. These are sugarcane knives. That one is wrapped up, as every one would be for export, in the greased paper of the time, and then brown paper, and tied with twine, and every joint is knotted in the twine. They would have all the special labels that stuck onto it that show you Spear and Jackson's works in I suppose the mid 19th century, although this is made 100 years later. And what is inside that is that these particular knives were made by saw manufacturers, simply because the material, this material, is the material they use for making saw plate, and so that's how they could manufacture those just as easy as making a saw. So whether it's a saw or a sugarcane knife, they could do the business with it, make it as well as anyone else could. What is different about this one is, instead of this being made from saw plate, this is actually forged steel. So it will be a heavy steel bar drawn out, that's 5/16 of an inch thick down to an edge, and I suppose that must be 3 foot long on the blade. And this is another form of cane knife, quite an old one actually. I'm guessing, but I shouldn't be far wrong to say something in the order of about 1850. I found this particular blade without the handle in a workshop of a silver forger who was in Rockingham Street, and it was just lying against the wall, and so I took it with other things. It was rusty beyond belief, and I had a friend of mine, a grinder, to grind it me. Brian Alcott ground me that up, and Mr. Jack Jewett, whose footprint tool firm at that time had a woodworking shop, wood handle shop they called it, and I gave him the idea of the pattern of the handle I wanted on it, and their fellow there made the handle out of beechwood and handled it for us. So it's exactly to the same pattern as it would have been made 150 years ago. Lighter tools of that sort are known as machettes. That's what these are. This one has horn handle, two scales, two side plates called scales, with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rivets to it. I think that this one was made in 1945. It's got a broad arrow mark on it, meaning it was government property, and it said A.W. Bisbee. Oh yes, A.W. Bisbee, Sheffield on it. This is another one of a different pattern. Each area of the world, wherever these were used for cutting down growth, and they were used in jungles as well as other places. This is number 55. It's Thomas Elliot, whoever they are, Castile, Sheffield. Wants some further research doing on that one for its age. And a further one. The interesting thing, of course, is the blades are all different shapes according to the region in the world that they were going to. Certainly on later ones and early ones, many machettes were made with what they called fullered grooves. These grooves here. What it did is difficult to say. I suspect that what happened there is, in putting the grooves in, it might have stiffened the blade. They'd be hammered in at first, but it would tend to stiffen the blade and stop it from bending so easily. The trademark is Mongoose, and the name on it is Wilson. And Wilson's later, these were made certainly during the war period or just after, and right up to the British Steel nationalising the steel industry, when Wilson's couldn't get the quality of steel he wanted to make these because the tonnage wasn't big enough, and so British Steel just wouldn't accept their orders, and so they had to go out of business. So that was another industry that was lost. But the firm Wilson went on to make spanners, and they call them Gordon spanners, because Gordon was the name of one of their sons. Other forms of pruning are for tea and coffee. These are called pruning hooks, and they came in innumerable sizes, all different. Some heavy blades, short handles, light blades, long handles, and so on. And two more here, and a third one. This one was for cutting sisal, so it went where sisal was grown. I'm not sure which. There was some island, I don't know if it's the Andaman Islands that grew sisal, but these others are tea and coffee pruners. Any catalogues that these are listed in never ever give an indication of why they should be different in length, in the size of blade, the section of blade, the type of fastening on the handle. Some are rivets, some have got washers to the rivets, and so on, and it becomes quite we might have 20, 30 different patterns of these, but they're all to do with the pruning of the tea and coffee bushes. Rubber was another industry in which tools for tapping rubber trees were made these are 4 different examples of rubber tapping knives and gouges, and each one will be for doing the tapping of rubber in different parts of the world. Each one, they wanted something different from the other, so it was a nightmare knowing to get the right tools to the right place. Whilst we're on tapping rubber, it reminds me that over here, this was a device that James Chesterman made sometime in the 1930s, I suspect. And what it is, it's a balance scale. And here we have a hook, and when the latex had been taken from the tree, it was put into a bag which was hung on there. This is a sliding weight, and when this was held up like that with the bag on it, the sliding weight, once this being balanced, the weight could be read off on this scale. To me, it looks a highly impractical thing, because the first thing that's going to happen is somebody's going to lose this weight. It's a free agent from the actual beam, so it doesn't look like a very good idea, and I wouldn't like to lose that in the jungle and try and find it again. The last thing that we're going to show you in this section of tools for plantations is this tape measure, which is a linen tape marked in feet and inches, or London as it's spelt there. That is the length of a London foot. But on the other side are these peculiar signs, which mean absolutely nothing to the Sheffield user, people like me. However, what happened here was that it was given to me from James Chesterman, and it has a leather case, and it has some unusual words there, and an elephant. I took this across the way to see some person in a department who came from this country, and he told me that the elephant is the symbol of Thailand. So that's where it comes from. If I can get my piece of paper right, this represents the name of the king. This says linen tape measure. This says it's 80 cube, K-E-U-B, which is the length, and so on. So, and that says SEN equals half a cube, whatever that means, but it's obviously to do with measures of length. So this is no doubt for measuring, no doubt, timber, because teak came out of Thailand and Burma in a big way, and I can well imagine this being used for that purpose.